Chapter 5. Built from white speckled granite, the castle of Gwydion stretched high, its towers piercing the sky. The setting sun glinted off its polished white and green-flecked walls. The sorceress ran her gloved hand along the chipped battlement and breathed deeply of the autumn air. The world seemed at peace and in dreamy slumber. Earthy, rich tones of burning muskroot, olibanum, and the sweet raklichi plant drifted from the courtyard. Earthy, rich tones of burning muskroot, olibanum, and the sweet raklichi plant drifted from the courtyard. As the priestesses burned the evening's incense in worship to the goddess Risana, they weaved through the gardens and disappeared into the temple. Imps scampered through the outer courtyard, their attack on Dagmar only partially successful. Nevertheless, fresh blood whetted their appetites, and the fallen fairies hungered for more. They screeched and shoved one another as they fought over the very best spot, a spot which would allow their yellowed eyes to once again see the man who took pity on them. Dirk. Samine lifted her eyeglass and scanned the horizon from her lofty perch. A few scraggly trees dotted the rough terrain. To the north, she could almost see the glowing orbs of the great perimeter, and somewhere beyond, the land of Naganjo. She glanced away. She dared not risk a glimpse of the orbs for fear of being blinded. A gust of wind buffeted the tower, and Samine steadied herself against the rampart. Her white robes billowed, but a gold belt anchored them around her waist. A crown of fiery copper hair swirled and danced about her pale face, like the tendrils of flames lapping at a sacrifice in the temple's stone altar. She pushed the curls away from her eyes, wishing she had tied them back. The autumn's chill crawled down her neck and into her toes. She rubbed her gloved arms for warmth and paced the battlement. Where was he? She should have tried the Yusel stones, but she was afraid of what she might see. A horn blew. Samine peered through the eyeglass and caught a glimpse of an advancing caravan. Grinning, she turned and descended from the tower's heights, adjusting her robes and hair as she went. For years she had planned for this very day. Risana would be pleased with her. She waited at the top of the steps leading down into the courtyard. Lush green shrubbery lined the paths that crisscrossed below her, evergreen against the waning colors of autumn, fitting for a goddess of fertility and life. Beyond the gardens, the white dome of the temple rose into the sky like a woman with a child in her 9th month. Risana had given birth to the humans, despite what the guardians taught, and Samine was determined to let the world know. The delicate carvings and mosaic murals adorning the dome glinted in the late afternoon light. Samine blinked away their glare and turned her gaze back to the advancing caravan. For too long Dirk had avoided her and hid among the thieves and outcasts. Not any more. Risana's time had come. She straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. A horn echoed off Gwydion's towers as the caravan poured through the gates and parted to one side or the other. A hush fell over the imps. 4 black horses, their heads adorned with black and gold plumes, pulled a carriage made of dragon bones. Hooves and wheels clattered over the cobblestone street and halted before Samine. The driver, a wiry elf, jumped from his seat and opened the coach's door. Lord Dirk stepped out, flourishing a polished black cane, and dressed like a king in a black doublet, a matching cloak lined with fur, and a ringlet of silver on his head. Still as handsome as the day Samine had first laid eyes on him. Dirk displayed little signs of aging except for a few strands of silver streaking his thick black hair and goatee. A handful of crows scattered at his approach. Their flapping wings and guttural cries broke the silence. "Lord Dirk!" Samine proclaimed. "Welcome to Gwydion, the temple of the lovely Risana." Her servant stepped from the shadows and knelt. Dirk nodded in return. He turned to Samine, his silky doublet reflecting the glare of the sun. Samine searched his eyes. Had he forgiven her? She raised her gloved hand, and a servant stepped forward. "Take Dirk's men to the barracks and attend to their needs." The servant nodded and trotted down the steps. "Shall we proceed inside?" Samine asked. After leading Dirk through a short tour of the great hall and keep, Samine took him to her private chambers. A large fire crackled in the hearth. It warmed the cold marble floors and diminished the chill in the room. 2 elaborately carved oak chairs covered in red and gold patterned velvet sat in front of the fireplace. An archway led into an adjoining room, where Samine's bed towered above a large bare rug, its head still attached. Dark wood posts spiraled to the ceiling. Heavy, blood-red drapes enclosed the bed. Samine settled in one of the chairs next to the blazing fire and loosened her robe. She motioned for Dirk to join her, the chair ample enough for the 2 of them. Instead, he sat across from her. "It is true, then, you have the pearl?" Dirk rested his black polished cane across his knees. Samine sulked. "Business already? We have barely been reacquainted." "What is to know, Samine?" He glanced around the room. "You have been feasting like a queen, while I have been scavenging like a dog in Dirka." "Scavenging?" She raised her eyebrows. "You manipulated your way into lordship. You reign as king over thieves and murderers. I must say, you have done rather well for yourself." "You haven't suffered like the rest of us." "You have no idea how much I've suffered." Samine clenched the chair's arm. "Did you think Resana would let such transgressions go unpunished? No, I paid for my failures, as well as yours and Nock's. And she would continue to pay for Nock's betrayal." She took a deep breath and squared her shoulders. "But I remained faithful. Where were you while I was maintaining the temple? I was the one who planted the seeds of doubt in the heart of Nalu, and like tares among wheat the seeds grew. The plains people have embraced the false divinity of the Nuja, and now they will embrace the goddess Resana. And what did you do?" Dirk twisted the cane in his fingers and smiled. "You don't still blame me, do you? If I had, would I have sent for you?" She relaxed her grip on the chair and leaned forward. "Let's not dwell on past mistakes when we have the opportunity for vengeance, and the victory is certainly ours." "You said that last time, and look where it got us. Do you even know what happened to Nock?" "He got what he deserved," Samine ground her teeth. "He was supposed to be Risana's chosen one." "Doesn't friendship mean anything to you anymore?" Dirk shook his head. "While you were feigning innocence in your little temple, he crossed over into Nganjo and made a pact with the queen of the underworld. He wants nothing to do with you or your feeble goddess." Anger darkened her thoughts. She stood. "Have you turned your back on Rizana too?" He stared at her, his dark eyes smoldering. "I have not seen you among the faithful pilgrims paying homage to her these past 30 years. Samine narrowed her eyes. "Have you forsaken her?" "How do you expect me to traverse the countryside when there's been a bounty on my head?" Samine lifted her chin. "It didn't stop you today." "Then delay me no more, that I may go to the temple right now and pay homage to that great goddess who seems incapable of escaping her confines." "Resana is a jealous god. Do not mock her." Samine rubbed her temples. "Such blasphemy! How could he disrespect the goddess like that? Perhaps she should have disposed of him, then risked the fires of the abyss." No, she would not think like that. He had been her friend until Resana entered her life. So many years had passed since their time in Ganya, and the rift grew deeper and wider between them. Could she ever restore it? Had not Resana promised to? She exhaled her mounting frustration. "I don't expect you to understand the complexity of her situation and what it will take to free her. But in your simple-mindedness, do not anger her, or you will be worse off than Nock." "May Resana have mercy," Dirk glared at Samine, "for my anger is not directed at her, but her high priestess." Samine cocked her head. "And what have I done to deserve your anger? Look, I didn't come all this way to argue over the past. And have I brought any of this up? It's just that we were a team. You, me, Nock. Doesn't it bother you in the least what happened to him? To us?" She glanced at the flickering flame and weighed her response. "Nock made his choice." She faced him and tried to read his eyes. Of course it bothers me, but don't you understand why I had to do what I did? Dirk clenched his jaw and tapped his cane against his boots. Finally he glanced up. You did it for Rosanna. Yes. Samine returned to her seat and crossed her legs. So, are you or are you not interested in hearing what I have to say? He sighed, but nodded. 30-some years ago, Rosanna gave me a vision of a child born beneath the dark star. She marked him to undo the chains that bind her in the underworld. Dirk narrowed his eyes and leaned forward. Who is he? All in good time. Let us not get ahead of ourselves, shall we? Samine smiled. She had at last captured his interest. She relaxed against the smooth upholstery. If my sources are correct, we have found the whereabouts of the dagger keeper. He rubbed his goatee. So with the dagger and the supposed Mark One, you plan to free Rosanna? Yes, and resurrect Steigen from the abyss. Rosanna will want her mortal lover at her side. How are you going to do that? There are ways we have only dreamed about until now. Samine's thoughts drifted as she rubbed her gloved arms. I have delved deep into the Toaz Dikon, seen things you would only imagine in your worst nightmare. Yes, there is always a way, but how much are you willing to pay? For every desire met, a sacrifice must be made. Samine? She blinked and her focus returned to him. She had been lost in her thoughts again. I have at my disposal new resources, fresh information, and best of all, a spy. Before he could respond, she beckoned with her hand and a young man stepped into the room. A silky black robe flowed from his shoulders to the ground. His blonde hair had been slicked back into a black band at his neck, and a scab laceration cut across his nose and left cheek. He bowed before Dirk and straightened. Samine stood and draped her arm across his broad shoulders. I would like for you to meet my new apprentice, Imarin. Dirk huffed. You mean your new bedfellow? Samine rolled her eyes and withdrew her arm. Jealous? Hardly. Dirk stood and studied the young man. What happened to your face? Imarin eyed him. Wounds are expected in battle. He has secured the Book of Records and the old Tukwa scrolls for us, as well as the sacred pearl. Samine ran her hand along his shoulder. The pearl? Dirk rolled the cane between his fingers. Does Karasi still remain with us? Have you seen her? Samine shook her head. Karasi hasn't emerged from the pearl in 3 centuries. I would think she had died if it weren't for the strength of the perimeter. As it is, the perimeter stones remain strong, and the barrier will continue to prevent Steigen's return until Karasi dies. Samine settled back in her chair. She's worthless to us, but Rosanna believes otherwise. She wants to see Karasi suffer before she kills her. And how do you kill a spirit being like her? Samine shrugged. Rosanna knows. Dirk turned his gaze back to Imarin and cocked his head. Were you studying to be a guardian? Imarin's hand pressed against the Nevin's mark on his neck. An apprentice, huh? Already in your 3rd term. Still, I have to wonder. Dirk lifted the cane toward Imarin. What possessed you to leave after so long? What possessed you to leave when you did? Dirk stabbed the cane into the ground. I did not wait 600 years to be marked as one of them. Now answer my— Dirk, Samine interrupted. That hardly seems necessary. How do you know we can trust him? I'd rather not make the same mistake we made with Adrian. Samine traced the gold pattern on the chair's arm. I underestimated the dwarf. But that was then. This is now. Imarin has already proven himself as far as I'm concerned. Besides, he has my old mentor's blessing. Dirk huffed and settled in his chair. Don't tell me you're still sleeping with him. Samine clenched her teeth, like it had been her choice. Would Dirk never forgive her? Why did she bother with him? Because he is part of my plan, Rosanna's voice whispered in her mind. He will be the seed, a mortal vessel for my beloved, and through you my eternal glory shall return once more. She couldn't lose focus, no matter how irritating he could be. She couldn't fail Rosanna again. Sameen? Her attention snapped back to Dirk. No, I'm not. And it isn't any business of yours, now is it? Calm down, he raised his hand. I came all the way from Durka to assist you. Do you think I care who you are betting? He crossed his legs and laid his cane across his lap. So what are your plans, Sameen? We have no army, no weapons. The Guardians aren't going to just let us sacrifice a human and bring back the dead. Sameen dismissed Imaran with a nod and sat back down. Badera and Praeton, the two great cities of the plains, are influential throughout Nalu, and they are ready for change. Sameen smiled. How would you like to be king, Dirk? King of Badara? He raised his eyebrows. King? Yes, and perhaps one day king of all of Nalu. And what about you? I am Rizana's high priestess. I desire nothing more than to serve her. Her word is my command. Find a king, she said, and I chose you. Of course, I can choose another, if you'd prefer. No, I'm interested in hearing more of what you have to say. Sameen reclined in her chair. Have you heard of the Twamart curse?